Our main focus is sustainable agriculture and food systems research, education, and extension or outreach. We do research at one of the 18 research facilities, but also other facilities. Empowering Mountain Food Systems is one of our food system programs located in Western North Carolina. I can answer any questions about some of the other SEF's programs and initiatives, but any Empowering Mountain Food System questions, we'll have Laura Loffer answer. All right, thank you.
Great. Thanks. And I'm sorry, just Jennifer, I want to make sure we're recording and that everybody's okay with us recording this. We'll be sharing it. It'll be on our website and we'll be sharing it with other folks who couldn't join us today. So Empowering Mountain Food Systems grew out of supply chain work that we were already doing at the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. And the Department of Commerce asked us to apply to an Appalachian Regional Commission power grant in 2018. And fortunately, that was awarded and we began work in Western North Carolina. That first phase, we focused only on 7 counties and we focused on agritourism, our small business center collaboration. We also had an apprenticeship program. We also had our education and loan and grant program, and it was so successful, ARC wanted to fund us again. And so we're very grateful to be here and have restarted our program, this one, in 2024, and look forward to working in the region moving forward. This grant funding will go through 2027. All right, next slide. I did want to show the counties that we're working in. We have, as I said, a much broader scope than we had before. And how these counties were selected, we are in the ARC footprint. Every cooperative extension director in these counties wanted to participate, and also food hubs, councils of government, and small business centers committed to participating in this region. Quickly, our allied partners, the small business centers, our offices, for some of us are here at the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Cooperative Extension, of course, NC Farm Link, Stephen Bishop is part of our team. Our councils of government in the region. We're very grateful for our loan program with Partner Capital and Resourceful Communities, and their essential work with food hubs has been very, very helpful. So who we serve, farmers, food producers, farmers markets, food hubs, food councils, commercial kitchens, commissaries, meat processors, and newly in this time, we really do want to work with more fiber farmers. So that's something we'll be focusing on in 2026. So what was our purpose and scope? The purpose was to assess the food system supply chain, identifying opportunities to expand production markets and develop business growth strategies while assessing barriers to growth and development of various links in the supply chain. And, you know, what is very important about this process that we want folks to know is we're not making recommendations from Empowering Mountain Food Systems or SEFs. We are sharing recommendations that we heard from over 100 folks that we interviewed. So it's really important for us to emphasize. This scope expanded and changed, of course, due to Hurricane Helene, and Patrick did a heroic job of going back and interviewing folks he had already interviewed because, of course, our landscape, our physical and economic landscape changed drastically. And so we expanded our timeline. This took a little longer than we had anticipated. In interviews, we added on to our interview questions about hurricane damage recovery through spring 2025. So I will pass it on to Patrick now to talk about the supply chain assessment objectives. So Dr. Barron, if you could introduce yourself, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I know many of you, but for those I don't, I'm Patrick Barron. I really focus across the Western North Carolina on a lot of issues that intersect around food systems, community health, the nonprofit network that supports emergency food relief, nutrition access, and currently a lot of the, emerging policy issues and other changes to the macro landscape that we're operating in and how they're impacting all of that. So I just want to pause for a second and talk about how this document we're sharing with you all today and kind of giving a brief overview of today is you all are the planners. You're a special audience of stakeholders that we wanted to really make sure we connected with in particular, and shared a resource that's not just informative, but also has a lot of depth and detail in it that is meant to really help you all. Your process as you're planning things as an organization, as we're networking as a region, collaborating across different sectors to fill different gaps and address different barriers. I think we're finding a lot of us are sharing a lot more common ground in terms of existential or challenging issues that are presented to us today. So this is really a document that's meant to add a lot of information behind the planning processes and the ways we engage separately and together with a lot of these challenges. Um, we move through a lot of this information to identify emerging needs and barriers, especially those that are post hurricane and post 2025, a lot of new policy issues, and incorporate that really again. So there's a basis for evidence focused planning. We're not all just kind of off on our own figuring it out. There's like a centralized resource that we can refer back to that helps inform policy, planning, advocacy, investment in the system. Next slide, please. So as Laura mentioned, we talked to a lot of people: farmers, meat and dairy processors, food hubs, commercial kitchens, commissary kitchens, people who run food trucks, farm stands, grocery stores. A lot of interviews were face to face and in person. Some were online, some were in focus groups. We went everywhere people would be willing to meet with us for many months. And ultimately, we conducted 55 in-depth interviews, 3 farmer focus groups with 23 different participants in it, and completed 66 online surveys with farmers and people who run direct-to-consumer vendor operations. Here are some fun results. Starting with wholesale markets and food hubs. A lot of hubs in the last few years have expanded operations, expanded sales, started pushing into new markets. And this has been supported with a lot of different layers of funding: LFPA, HOP. These were different programs from federal programs, different grants, the budget allocation that the state put forward that was released last year. And it's worth noting that while that support was really robust, most of that stuff is gone as of summer 2025. It's a very, very different funding landscape, and the one that was enabling a lot of that growth of previous years has dramatically shifted. All of the hubs in this assessment are nonprofits. That's not universally true of North Carolina food hubs, but it is for the ones that are in this group and that are clustered in the West. And funding frameworks with nonprofits in general, those associated with food access, health, hunger, nutrition, they're all changing. The social and health safety net at large is changing, and the parts of it that are really backboned by nonprofits and the funding and support that has supported that previously is very, very different. And that has led to a state of evolution, a lot of emerging adaptive strategies, and a lot of that encompassing the development of new revenue streams, often within a commercial aspect within food systems, which this assessment really points towards. And that's a level of planning I really want to emphasize within this, is this development of commercial activities through entry and deeper entry, expanding, diversifying the ways that we engage with the supply chain as a region. Direct-to-consumer markets and the farmers that really support that. Obviously, farmers are in food hubs too, but they don't have that middleman of sales and marketing. They're in a different place. In the last few years, they have, with exceptions, stagnated broadly across this region. The hurricane itself was also a major blow to markets. And our assessment demonstrated that there are some very particular bottlenecks to that growth that exist in the form of infrastructure, capacity, different kinds of resources that are not the same. Different counties are in different places, different markets exist in different frameworks. And our assessment really looked at a variety of different kinds of bottlenecks that exist in different parts of our region that are stymieing and slowing that growth. And in the post-hurricane environment, changing and slowing down and complicating, in some cases, the recovery process. Farmers themselves also were hit. Those that were very directly in the path of the hurricane were impacted very directly. We'll get deeper into that. Their markets, whether they were in the path or not of actual destruction on their farm, were also very, very dramatically affected. But they're also facing perennial issues that are just kind of getting more intense. The cost of production of food is going up, and food prices the sales price that they are able to achieve within DTC markets is not commensurate with that in many places. And there's just been a softening of both consumer demand and it seems broadly maybe more consumer buying power. The consumer has been under stress. The dollar that they're thinking about on their food budget is being considered very differently. And that's been a challenge in the past, but I think there is also some silver lining potential opportunities in that as we move forward in this era of inflation and differing supply chains. And we'll get deeper into that too. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to run down briefly. This is like the farmer priority needs that encompass long-term needs and acute post-hurricane needs in terms of infrastructure on the farm. And that included and was first most highlighted by farmers in terms of season extension. They really wanted to expand their seasons. This is, it's not something that people in the past haven't had access to, but even those that had it needed and wanted it more. A lot of it got destroyed in the hurricane and needed to be replaced or repaired. Broadly written, season extension infrastructure was seen as a very accessible way to start boosting profits and addressing some on-farm infrastructure needs. Soil fertility and contamination testing, big on a normal day, but enormous post-hurricane. People are so concerned, especially about fertility. There hasn't been a lot of, blessedly, evidence that contamination is a widespread issue, but in the earlier days, there's still people want to know more. But fertility is the thing. So many fields were stripped of their topsoil. We have to account for so much loss of soil nutrient and soil composition, the amount of rain, acidified soil across the entire region in one fell swoop. Like there is really just a need to know more about the state of soil fertility, and farmers really notice that. Connected to that is the need for access to a cheap and affordable bulk compost and topsoil. That is just an issue that is so far widespread, especially in the hurricane damage zone. And so much good farmland is next to a waterway, and all of that good topsoil is now sand in so many places. Livestock feeds faces a similar issue. A lot of those fields that were wiped out were used for feed production, and we're still facing a dearth regionally of the ability to produce that which is needed to support livestock. But even when we were doing better with that, affordable feed was still an access issue in more rural areas and was bottlenecking the number of cattle people could support on their farm. Labor, especially skilled labor, is a huge issue, perennial and even bigger post-hurricane. And then just writ large, there's just a lot of damaged equipment on a lot of different farms that needs replacement and repair still. And we've been identifying that on a rolling basis, especially within the damage zone. In terms of non-infrastructure needs, there's a lot of need for support around education, training, and technical assistance. And again, we're still focusing on farmers as a discrete group right now. And that's particularly in the areas of business development, financial planning for agriculture business, and navigating and submitting grant applications, doubly so post, again, hurricane. A lot of our farmers are saying they were just drowning in paperwork that they didn't understand, processes that weren't clear, and the ability to actually get funding back was like under 30% of people who were trying were actually receiving it months and months and months into the process. They really want to be able to have more support with sales. There's a strongly noted issue that's just like, we know how to sell our stuff to a person who walks up to us at a farm stand, but you just can't do that and do the online marketing and the new customer development and the research about new markets to develop those customers. Agritourism is seen as a way to do this. If you want to go down that route, it's seen as potentially very useful, and a lot of people did want more support with that. This was also an issue in a lot of rural areas where roads are still just kind of crap. It's harder to get people to where your farm is in many cases. And we heard this in a lot of areas that were experiencing still infrastructure repair so many months later after the hurricane. This is all just basically depressed the sales and ripped a lot of money out of the pockets of farmers as they're entering growing season two after, harvest season one and prepping for growing season two post hurricane. And they're just short on capital. And a niche issue that we heard just pop up regularly was just like a lot of farmers are old. There's been very little engagement with a formal farm succession planning, and they're just kind of hoping this stuff stays farmland in a lot of cases. And there hasn't been a lot of concerted effort to make sure that that actually is the future of this land that people are currently farming on, but finding that their age and the capacity to find labor to support them is really impacting their ability to continue running commercial agriculture. food hubs. Every farmer really, really who has a food hub in their network is 97% of them are saying like, this is so important to my business. The processes work for me. It backbones my ability to make a plan for the year, to know I have guaranteed sales here, allows me to then plan for that and take some chances. Try some crops I haven't tried before. Try a market out I haven't tried before, because you have some kind of backbone to go back to and say, okay, that worked, it didn't work, but I still know I'm kind of able to keep functioning because the food hub's there, they'll buy what I have, and I know the prices I can get. Um, it's a connector. It's essential to the growth and health of the supply chain. And where it isn't, where farmers do not have access to wholesale markets in the form of food hubs, they want them and they are planning to try and find a way to access them. And this works because a lot of food hubs also really want to expand their networks. But there's still connection points to be made, especially in the far west. The further west you go, the further you get away from. But we have new food hub infrastructure popping up on the landscape within the time of this assessment. Hello, Haywood Christian Ministry. Um, and so the need for access is widespread, but we're seeing that access be addressed piece by piece. The food hubs are not cheap or easy to bring online. Um, that all leads to food hubs thinking about how they're diversifying some of their operations and revenue streams. And there's some disagreement among hubs about what the priorities are there and about how much the modes of collaboration should align. Should they all be working together in concerted planning efforts? Or is that going to dilute the urgency of one organization's needs into a pool that where those needs are not really coming to the surface? Or are there just some things that people just simply do not agree on? It's a point that needs to be looked into more, I think, to look at where the areas of alignment are and to see where collaborative potential is, while also being cognizant that like some priorities may not be met through that kind of collaboration and may require other strategies as well. Boy, meat processors are making a good living right now, though. If you run a USDA inspected meat processor in the West right now, you tend to have about a year-long waiting time of clients to go, and you have like a very long time to bring on new people who you aren't already working with, new people being new livestock farmers. Um, Even where those folks are custom exempt and even where they're NCDA or state inspected, like they're making a good living and there is a high demand for those services. $15,000 a month for a custom exempt operation that started in November was making that by December. That's post hurricane, and they're not in the middle of the action. They're out in the farther west areas. Um, you're seeing a lot of these meat processors uh, go through pathways of growth where they'll start with a custom exempt. After a year or two, they'll reinvest those revenues, scale up NCDA inspection, more revenues, reinvested a few years later, USDA inspection. And then you have operations with 3, 4, 5 employees that are drawing down 1 point something million dollar annual revenues and have a year-long waiting list and are just reinvesting again to be able to scale up further. But this presents a bottleneck. There are those wait lists are areas where commerce is not happening that could be happening, where there are markets that are not being reached because there's a critical point in between raising a cattle to slaughter weight and getting retail meat on the market. So there are also some interesting thoughts here that I can go into later and that are in the long report that talk about new models that are being proposed by meat processors for reducing waste around carcass disposal that are super interesting and might actually feed back into the need for soil amendments, but we'll cover that if you want to go into that in depth later. Dairy processors got slammed. Part of it is where they are. It's just area. They tend to be clustered in this assessment in areas that were very, very hard hit by the hurricane. But part of it is like what their infrastructure looks like. Cheese caves, like things that are like, oh boy, you've got all your stuff kind of like subterranean right now for aging. Like it's a lot of infrastructure that just got slammed. And they were talking about enormous losses, huge hangups. Excuse me, I have a sinus infection that I hope isn't pre-COVID. Um, Huge hangups with getting reimbursement through the feds, through FEMA, through insurance, a huge slowdown in agritourism, which was a big part of their whole model for making money, and just big, big market losses around the Asheville area where they tended to market a lot of their product. So dairy processors just really got it hard in our assessment and need a lot of support to get back to where they need to be. Commissary kitchens. I assume everybody here kind of knows briefly the difference between a commissary and a commercial kitchen, but basically a commissary is a type of commercial inspected kitchen that focuses mainly on like catering, food trucks, mobile food units, things that are like prepped in place and then served to the public as prepared food. They're dotted across the landscape. They're serving clients that are really, really local to where they are. Like the people don't travel super far to get to a commissary. A restaurant can decide to open up after hours and offer itself as a commissary to other clients who then can come in, prep food, and clean up and be gone by the morning. They're pretty low cost to develop. Again, there are pathways to growth. You start small, you make some money. It's usually coupled with like you start a food business and you run a commissary that takes care of your overhead and you start renting out space to others to start to draw in a new revenue stream. They make money. They're profitable. When they're done smart, they're really interesting. They aren't inherently connected to local food, but we saw some very interesting examples where they were, where either the wholesale access to food was for prepping food at scale for a catering company or a food truck was done through a meat processor that was local or a food hub that was local and sold wholesale. And sometimes we saw a model in Madison and Yancey County, where we had like a farm to food truck, a farm that does a lot of the own growing of their product for ingredients, rented commissary space, ran a food truck in Burnsville, was making good money off that, has used that money to reinvest and buy a building. Now they're going to rent out to 5 other food trucks, and they're going to prioritize businesses that source their ingredients for food locally from local markets. And that's a really interesting kind of holistic model to take this and really intimately tie it and engage it with the local food system, with local food economy. And again, this is an area where some nonprofits are considering commissary development as a way to diversify some of those revenue streams. Commercial, back one.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Gotcha.
Commercial kitchens are more like nonprofits or subsidiaries of public organizations like extension offices. They are within the revenue diversification strategies of some of the food hubs and some of the other planned operations, but at a glance, like they're not to make money. They all support a nonprofit that essentially breaks even and provides an important service. They support food businesses. Again, that can be like more or less depending on the way that it's set up geared towards local food, but you can really build a commercial kitchen that is geared towards that. And it's at the very small level about value-added processing for cottage industries and very small businesses. There's one exact example of this at a very large level, and that supports businesses that are like growing up and have multiple employees and are trying to source a whole bunch of chickpeas to make a bunch of roots hummus or something like that. They're like a stimulus and an asset for the local food businesses, and they're good for market development, good for revenue diversification, can be geared towards local food. I don't know if you would call it the same sort of bottleneck towards growth that you would characterize like a meat processor in our local economy right now, but where they're done right, they are certainly an asset towards local food business growth, new markets, new product lines, things like that that can be very cleverly geared for revenue diversification and to support local food. Farm stands and direct-to-consumer vendors are short on cold storage, as is almost everybody around the landscape post-hurricane. Like cold storage is just a widespread need. We can talk more about that, and there's a whole bunch of detail about that in the reference document. But that direct-to-consumer stuff, where it's put in the path of commerce, is a good revenue stream, generally for farmers who are like setting up a roadside stand. And a lot of them who are doing that are kind of like they've done their market research, they know where they want to be, they know who they're trying to access. Their concern is that tourism is slacking off at large and that not enough people are coming where they used to go. But they're really interested in finding ways to increase direct-to-consumer sales, to increase retail access to local food, and especially their local food. Um, Almost all of them want to upgrade their equipment. They have interest in commercial kitchens because they want to do value-added processing to sell jams and jellies and such at their roadside stand as well. Very, very few of them, I think exactly 2 out of 17, were using SNAP or WIC. One was using double up food bucks. So there's a lot of room around that. We can talk a lot about how SNAP and WIC and DUFB are changing right now, but in theory, this was something that like wasn't really tapped into as a potential resource. As far as farmers markets went in our sample, there were some distinct needs for upgrades around facilities, the weather stuff, the coverage over for bad weather, access to bathrooms, potable water. Again, SNAP EBT present at about half of them, but not widespread. And there were some long-standing issues that are not new, but were again kind of worse post-hurricane about the variety of products that were available when, seasonality, relationships with vendors, and kind of just general concerns over ongoing funding sources, along with the rest of the nonprofit food world. So, our gaps writ large: inspected processors, wholesale markets, food hub capacity, commercial and commissary kitchens leading to that different levels of value-added processing, cold storage all over the place, farmer co-ops. Farmers are self-organizing in a way into cooperative structures I have never seen before. And it is organic and it is popping up on its own around need. A lot of it is where farmers do not have access to a food hub, because a food hub seems to be kind of performing it for like a semi role of a co-op. A lot of the co-ops want to form so they can scale up for wholesale market access. Well, the food hub does that. A lot of them want to scale up so they can have resource sharing. A lot of farmers who serve the same food hub region or the same hubs are suppliers for that. They're kind of are networked in an informal way. This is accounting for that largely in areas where they just don't have access to a food hub, but they're not sort of organized around that. Here's an interesting one: cost competitive and easy access to direct to consumer retail. Yeah, it's hard to kind of get to where direct to consumer local food is sometimes. Farmers markets are only a couple days a week and are concentrated in Asheville. But cost competition. There's been so much inflation to the cost of supermarket food. We are in an era where we might be looking at a bit of a change in the paradigm of where local food is more expensive food, and where we may indeed, especially if we're able to expand wholesale and capacity at the food hubs, and invest more dollars in the local food production, could compete. Could compete in a way we've never competed for consumers that have never been open because of that just dollar premise to local food. So more on that in great detail, but this is something of an opportunity that has not really existed before, that is sort of a policy, product of policy and other issues that are contributing to rampant inflation in the cost of food in the last 4 years. Commercial compost production and sales. This is an opportunity if ever there was one. There is so much demand for compost, topsoil, soil amendments. Wholesale market access and sales. Again, value-added processing via commercial and commissary kitchens and the building adjacent food businesses. Farm to food trucks seems like a very promising model to me that just creates feedback loop after feedback loop to support the local food economy. Food trucks are a really mobile food. That's a big part of it. You can make money right now and you can build that business around local food access. Meat processing, desperately needed. Um, a lot of the policy issues are hitting programs like HOP, like different feeding programs that were focused on nutrition for seniors, school food, or yeah, sorry, educational programs for youth, things like that were focusing on food, early childhood education, food as medicine programs. So many of those are being slashed from federal budget lines. There's room, especially if we think also about the potential for value-added processing, especially around potentially for frozen and prepared foods, that there is room for actually an economic gap there. The way to make money that can perhaps also offset programming that is more charitably, philanthropically, or health focused around food as medicine is trying to support the same health needs and access needs while also drawing in a new revenue stream from an area that is right now a big gap both in health access and the economy. I'm not going to run through this because it's a little, well, I'm going to focus on this last one. Let me go back one. Um, Let me focus on this nonprofit thing for a second, because I think this is relevant to this audience in particular, where I think a lot of you all represent some of those nonprofits that are engaged in the local food system, are thinking about ways that we can collectively plan to develop new revenue streams and draw them into our system to account for some of the massive disinvestment that is happening, to offset our dependence on government funding that at best, looking forward, is highly unreliable. And at the same time, to marry that to these gaps in the supply chain, where, I mean, I know there are some people on this call who are actively planning within their organizations to address some of those gaps in order to support the local food economy, bring farmers closer to the needs that they are talking about as major priorities, stimulate the local food economy, and at the same time, diversify your own revenue streams. develop a new way to fund your operations so you can continue in an environment that is frankly getting pretty hostile to a lot of this stuff, and where there are some real threats to continuing to rely on the systems that and the funding sources that have previously supported this system. And in that we can do a lot at once together. So, conclusions, I see a lot of opportunities to collaborate across sectors right now, to marry some of the economic small business needs and the needs of the local food economy and supply chain to some of the holes that are being punched within the nonprofit system, within emergency food access, within health for this region. These gaps are opportunities. You see this happening. Some of the food hubs who are using the um, support they've had in the last few years to evolve and transform are encompassing a lot of this growth, expansion, and diversification. And I think at our best, we are seeing that this recovery process is best when it is highly integrated, where planning and response to this recovery is integrated and where we're looking towards the future as an integrated response. I think everyone for themselves in this environment is very, very dangerous. Because, if half the nonprofit feeding system, half the nonprofits that provide food to people go under, the other half needs to absorb that demand. Disinvestment in SNAP, WIC, all of this stuff ends up pushing more and more pressure onto this is not survival of the fittest or competition in capitalism. Like a competition here leading to only a few making it is perilous to say the least for the survivors of that competition. So that's not a win. Um, to get through this transformation period, there's going to need to be some really dedicated support from policymakers and funders in the forms of a lot of the regional foundations um, that thinks a little differently about what they're trying to support, because I think these needs have really shifted. And I think a lot of this planning pushes us into a new stage that is sort of just new territory in general. That's not going to happen overnight. And I think that needs a coordinated response that is supported from the resources, the organizations that are here and are engaged with this. Um, at the end of the day, we also can't have this be a massive loss in the long term of capacity to produce food here. If we lose a ton of agricultural land because markets collapse, farmers go out of business, and all of that becomes, you know, real estate, um, we will really lose something vital. And North Carolina, I think, is ranked second in the country in terms of the next 20 years of farmland loss projected. So, and all of that is to low density housing development, which, as everybody out here knows, is like, yeah, that's the number one threat to farmland. And there's a lot of pressure on farmers to be able to keep using that farm for agriculture commerce. Supporting those farmers is directly key to all of this. And I think no matter where you're going to think about how to support what part of this system, if farmers can't farm, we don't have much of a future in this.
Thank you,
That's all for
Patrick.
me.
Yeah, that was a great job. That's so, more than a year of work condensed. And as Patrick referenced, we do have a written document to share with y'all, a very long form one, um, over 70 pages, and then a shorter one that we will be sharing with everybody. Um, it, Jennifer, are there questions in the chat that we should address at this point?
Yeah, I've got three questions in the chat. Michelle Shiplet asked, and she asked, is there an opportunity for Graham County to also benefit from this study? It sounds like they're working on a food hub initiative, although Graham is not in the EMFS service area.
Yeah, I think even though, Michelle, you're not in the service area for empowering mountain food systems, this data still can be used to help you in your work going forward. And Patrick, can you
Yeah,
address
and
that as
Michelle,
well?
you and I have met through the Franklin Farm Hub, which is one of my other big projects right now. And Franklin Farm Hub is actually distinctly trying to cover the area that this assessment doesn't, which includes Graham County. Um, we that project is building off of all of this, so that the information here is I'm reporting out to all of the Franklin Farm Hub stakeholders, and you're actually on that invite list uh, in just a couple of weeks. And we will be talking directly about how all of this pertains to Grand County and the planning for that project, how that emerging hub is going to integrate with the rest of the hub network. So we're not entering needless competition, but where we are filling the gap around the far west, because that is the area. And so it's not just food hub access, of course, like we've already talked with you all about, like, how do we, if we're building a hub with wholesale access in Franklin, how do we cut you all in on the commercial activity? How do we make an opportunity for you that makes sense for your operation, that fills some of the gap? I mean, I know you all are like a hop provider. Um, like that's your textbook right out of the, so and to answer your question, Michelle Shiplet, like that's we're coming right at that from that angle of like that gap is exactly the gap that the Farm Hub in Franklin is aiming to cover, and we will be integrating all of this information, and I've just completed my assessment for them too. So that's kind of the other 5 counties.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Jennifer,
Yeah,
next
that's
question.
great to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
We had one other anonymous question come in. They said, I would love to hear more about the farmer cooperatives and what those are looking like. Um, is there any role that nonprofits can play in supporting them?
I could feel what came out of the assessment and what we're learning in the Franklin project right now, but it looks different depending on where you are. I think the first thing that I would say is that they're looking for support from the kind of nonprofit that a lot of these food hubs comprise, which is to say it's not just wholesale market access, yes, but also, and maybe I don't know if Nicole Heimbaugh's like would be spontaneously ready to jump in to talk about some of the ways that you all support your farmer supplier network, but like um, that it depends where you are. They're looking to have access to bulk resources like bulk livestock feed, bulk compost, bulk stuff like that. The logistics of that to be streamlined around like a group needs rather than everybody kind of figuring that out for themselves. They want wholesale market access. They want to be able to do knowledge sharing and tool sharing and resource sharing with a small group of people that they trust rather than a diffuse network of people where they're like, I don't know, I did that tool sharing thing last year and I got it back and that tractor was broke all to hell and I had to spend 4 out of the 5 days I had it just fixing it. So it's about having like a network around you of people who are of your community, who you know, who you trust, who you have relationships with, and where you're kind of using that common ground starting point to start addressing common needs collectively. And that doesn't always look the same. In fact, everywhere it is, it looks rather different. The common stuff is what I just listed. And I don't know, Nicole, would you be cool jumping in for a second just to talk about what you all are doing to support your farmer suppliers and how what you do engages with that question?
Yes, I'm happy to. In addition to trying to help fill in some of those gap areas that were mentioned here related to the need for high quality, low cost compost and the need for some certified commercial kitchen or commissary kitchen space to produce value added products, things like that. Another thing that we're doing with our farming partners is we are contracting with several of the smaller family farms located within our county that we have good relationships, good working relationships with. And the way that that works and how it is a benefit to them is on their end, they're able to say, this is what I can reasonably expect to produce in the coming growing season. This is what I would like to charge for it. And then we can commit to purchasing that amount of food, those at that value, that market rate. And then, in fact, we're able to pay a portion of the total contract value up front, pre-season, so in the winter season, actually, so that they have funds available to overwinter and also to get their growing season started. And on our end, there's a benefit because we know that we're going to, with a high degree of likelihood, be able to access exactly those foods at these times on this schedule for this rate for the coming growing season. And it also means that because we are contracting with them, we can have certain requests or requirements in place, such as food safety requirements, safe food handling, things like that. So So the entirety of the process enables us, it's a real kind of give and take that works well for both. And we're able to support them with connecting them with additional resources we learn about because of the sort of intimate nature of the relationship that we develop.
That's so awesome. Y'all are doing
Thank,
amazing work out
thanks,
there.
Nicole. And I also want to mention one of our project goals is to work with farms who want to do collaborative work together. And we have some training in place and some systems we'd love to work through extension offices potentially to do that. So if anybody on this webinar is interested in that, please reach out to me directly, and we can start getting to work on that and keep learning more about that process. I think there are a few more questions, Jennifer.
Yeah, we had one from Steve Duckett. Any ideas of how to replace SNAP funding for nutrition programs that contribute to the local food ecosystem?
I mean, this is something we're talking about with anything you take out of SNAP just becomes more pressure to deliver services on the nonprofit food system. Anything you take away from any of those federal resources just sort of shifts to the other side of the safety net, which is to say the regional nonprofits. So I think that the most important thing to recognize is that that demand goes nowhere when you simply remove the resource to meet that demand. It sort of either metastasizes into even worse and complications with access and health, and also that demand shifts onto the other tent pole of the safety net, which is the nonprofits. So I think the most direct way to account for that is to recognize that they're already absorbing that need and they provide their services for free, and they need to be supported to be able to start doing that in real time because it is already impacting their bottom lines. Um, they are also trying to, at the same time, as SNAP wasn't just a hunger program, it's a nutrition program to a certain extent. They're trying to account for greater nutrition within the food system. And that requires not just like budgeting, but like a lot of planning. You need to be able to distribute cold storage. You need the distribution for fresh food is so much more complicated than it is for canned goods. Um, and as Nicole points out, like insurance companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield are looking at the ROI, the return on investment of food as medicine, which is essentially like how much chronic disease can you prevent over 5 years of providing nutrition access for high risk, low income people who are not going to access that otherwise. Um, SNAP, WIC, Double Up Food Bucks, EBT, these were always intended to be programs that operate at that intersection. They were always kind of mediocre at best, and they're gone now. Well, they're functionally going away, or we can't rely on them as if anything, they're an active retreat and disinvestment. The reality is that right now the nonprofits are already picking up that demand, and they are doing it on a budget that is stretched thinner and thinner in order to cover that. And they are less able to account for nutrition the less they are able to do that. So the only answer, I think, to supporting people who are the ultimate victims of this type of disinvestment is to strengthen the side of the system that is accounting for those people's needs and struggling to do so. I mean, it's hard to do this, and it's not like this just happens. It happens, and it's very imperfect and it's incomplete, and there are already real fallout consequences from it. So yeah, the quick and easy answer,
Did you?
yeah, is just like the nonprofits need more money.
Right, right. Michelle might know more, but I do know that the North Carolina legislature is looking at some support. It's a mystery what's happening in Raleigh with the budget, but from what I've heard, there is some hope. Michelle, I don't know if you have any insight into current legislative actions or discussions.
I have no insight to state budget. Nobody does.
Okay.
I'll just be honest. However, so we do have a North Carolina local food council at the state level, and we've been talking about this. There's a working group called Community Health led by Dr. Amanda Hedgie at App State. And, I think there's SNAP benefits that's been cut in SNAP Ed too, just to be clear. And every kind of idea is out there, from even how do we raise more funds via sugar tax, perhaps, or one idea that's been put out there. But right now, I haven't seen anything that is really got, bipartisan support around it, let's just say. But, and there does have to be some funding made, that it cannot be just on the back of the nonprofits.
Right.
I think we
Right.
all acknowledge that. And there's some great, yes, preventative work, food is medicine, but it's, yeah. So there are some groups working that and people working on that. If anybody here would like to connect with those in the North Carolina local food council, I'm more than happy to help make those connections.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'd chime in that one of the next big projects that's getting teed up right now is MANA is centering their network in a sort of whole system-wide assessment on how they can most efficiently and effectively support their provider partner network of 250 some odd pantries who are all, you're right, Michelle, they can't account for this, but they already are. And they will collapse as well unless they're supported in real time. And like there needs to be short and long-term solutions to answering that question, because the last thing we can afford to have at a time like that is that the regional nonprofits that support immediate food access and are already absorbing that demand are crushed under the burden that they can't, so MANA's doing a whole system-wide assessment right now. We are trying to build an enormous collaborative effort behind that also engages with the other regional nonprofits and the local food economy to talk about this issue of how you start to shift these funding structures. But that's a big effort that will take a long time, and we really are looking to have that be plans put into action at different stages that can be, addressing this as it's coming up. But I would also throw out there that as that takes off, there will be a lot of ways to get engaged with that work, and we'll be reaching out to every single MANA partner across the whole region as we move forward and try to frame that question for the short term and the medium term and the long term.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. I want to be cognizant of time. Margarita, you had the question, is there updated data since Helene of the number of grocery stores in each county? We do have a map, a supply chain map, but I don't know that we included the number of grocery stores in each county. So I know that our project did not do that. I
We
don't know
have
if
the
anybody else.
Yeah, we have the direct food vendors, Margarita. We don't have the like chain grocery stores mapped, but we do
Mhm.
have the the vendors, both retail and wholesale, who focus on local food.
Great. I do want to spend just a moment, Jennifer, if you can let folks know how we have addressed some of the things that we've learned from the assessment and how that's changed our work a little bit in the last 6 months.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I did want to shout out to Brett. I did record your question, so we'll follow up with you about the easements after this.
Oh,
And as far as EMFS, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jennifer Badger, and I am your area specialized agent in agribusiness. So my role is split across both Empowering Mountain Food Systems and North Carolina Cooperative Extension. Um, in response to Patrick's findings, we did shift a number of our small business grants to be Helene focused. So immediately after the storm, we awarded over $100,000 to 40 different farms for replacement supplies, which included anything from um, fencing to cold storage replacement and expansion. We also secured an additional grant from the Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, specifically for those meat and dairy processors, which we realize are at that, kind of middle point of our supply chain in the processing. And those supplies ranged from uh, chicken cones to labeling and even solar, just in case of another power outage to protect that cold storage. And that totaled over $49,000 worth of an investment. So in addition to our grants and that, influx of capital into Western North Carolina, we are increasing our programming support, specifically for commercial kitchens and our value-added producers. We realize that, by adding that value, folks are able to capture a longer shelf life of a lot of these products and therefore retain more of their investment. And so this fall, we do have 3 different commercial kitchen related workshops coming up, as well as 2 different farm stand visits and educational opportunities. So I would highly recommend that you check out the Empowering Mountain Food System website. We've got a beautiful events calendar there where you can find the dates and times for those upcoming events.
Great, thank you. And I clicked off we did the questions. Oh, I'm in the wrong screen. Forgive me. And also just our Empowering Mountain Food Systems resources, the supply chain assessment, we'll share the shorter version with you, the glossy, beautiful thing, and then also the very long academic in-depth reporting that Patrick created. Jennifer mentioned our agribusiness education. Jennifer also offers one-on-one business development coaching that she's been working with over the last year. And we have grants and loans. Jennifer mentioned our grants, but we also have a loan program with Partner Capital that's very interesting and I think can be very impactful. And some new folks are that we've worked with post Helene are interested in that. And also we have partnership with NC FarmLink. Stephen Bishop is available to do presentations to your organizations. He works with us and he's part of Extension as well. And again, those programs we have with him are coming up and they're on our calendar as well. And the last thing we want to mention we're so excited about is our new local food and farm profiles. This is the 3rd time we've done this in collaboration with Noah Ronells from NC FarmLink and Hannah Dinkbar, the local food coordinator for NC State. We have a Yancey County example up here. These infographics focus on farm census data, and each county has one, and there's also one for each cog in the state. We have developed a resource packet that goes with these to tell you how to use these in your community to help drive the discussions like we talked about today. So this is another tool in the toolkit, in addition to the supply chain assessment, to help all of our partners talk about, what's happening specifically in their county and their region. When we send out the evaluation for this meeting, I'll include a link for the registration for the October 3rd webinar describing how to use the infographics. And that's it. Thank you. I do think we have another comment that Steve offered. Thank you, Steve, about the Soil and Water District farm easements and working land. So that's in the chat, and we will share that resource with everybody as well, in addition to the North Carolina Food Council information that Michelle shared. But we want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I'm not looking at the chat. Jennifer, is there anything else we need to cover?
There was just one last question. I know we've got 4 minutes left. Brett asked, curious if any farmers are utilizing farmland easement programs or similar methods to prevent development.
I have no idea.
I can probably help you a little with that. That was kind of where my comment was added or was intended for. But yeah, Buncombe County Soil and Water District holds conservation easements and is probably one of the lead counties in the state for that type of program. So Ariel Zipe with Buncombe Soil and Water is their farmland program manager. So she could give, and they have more on their website as well in terms of details. But you have that also. Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy holds easements in Buncombe County. They their lane, if you will, they do easements on scenic lands as well as working lands. The Soil and Water District basically, concentrates on working lands, and that's a resource for farmers there locally. County commissioners have been very supportive of that program and have put up a bond for several $1,000,000 to support farmland preservation. And of course, Buncombe's probably got the highest development pressure of any county in the region. So, so it's been used as kind of a model for a lot of the programs that are developing in the state. Henderson County has a kind of a program in its infancy that's getting started for that purpose as well. So, and also just present use value on property taxes, probably the biggest tool we have statewide to keep land affordable for farming.
And thank you so much, Steve. And what we hear a lot from farmers is there's so much information out there. There's an information overload, and folks need help, how to navigate this. And one of the things we do is we do outreach and education. And I believe it's November 1st, Jennifer, in Mitchell and Yancey counties. We're collaborating with the Small Business Center there, and we will have a present use value discussion, as well as Stephen Bishop will be there to talk about farmland preservation. So if you've registered for this webinar and you're not already in our system, you'll get updates about all our sessions coming up in the future. So thank you so much.
Laura, and there's also one on 6 in Madison County that Elizabeth's
That's right.
on there. So
yeah, what can you, Stephen, thanks. I'm so glad you're here. Can you remind us what that date is for Madison County?
I believe it's October the 6th at 6 p.m. It'll be a little 2-hour session on conservation easements and succession planning.
It's October 9th.
Great.
Oh, October 9th. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Great. And like I said, we'll when I send out the evaluation, I'll share our calendar with all y'all, and you can register. And we're also really interested to hear what else is missing out there in the landscape. What other services are folks seeing needed? And as Patrick was saying, we really do want to see this as a launch for partnerships and collaboration, as we're not only rebuilding post-hurricane, but invigorating our regional supply chain. So we want to collaborate with you, and Patrick has his information there. He's doing really great work in the community, and we want to stay in touch. So thank you so much, Jennifer. Thanks for running the comments and helping us, and thank you, Michelle, for being here, and Steve also for being here. We really appreciate your leadership in this project.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
and as I mentioned in the chat, if anybody wants to get in touch with me personally as to kind of like digest the report, the large long form 70-page thing, and think about how it applies to your org or whatever you're up to, please feel free to reach out to me personally. I drop my email in the chat, and I would be happy to talk to anybody.
Great.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks again, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
See ya.
everybody.
Bye-bye.